My youngest is in high school right now, but it's like summer we get a reprieve, and then when they go back to school, it's like that first semester or whatnot, they're just constantly bringing
Yep.
new stuff home all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this actually dovetails very much into what I wanted to have you on the show to talk about because, uh, okay, we can skip right past both Satanists, both living in red states in the Southwest, and immediately start to focus in on what I think is important because you're in Texas and I'm in Arizona. So what I think is particularly relevant to both of us right now is your governor is trying to push through vouchers as hard as he can. And as someone living in a red state with voucher systems already in place, I really don't think that the argument in this red state scenario is uh, one of multiculturalism and diversity and where that issue falls in book banning and all of that. I think where the issue really falls is if you look at what's happened in Arizona with our voucher system, it has caused huge government overruns on costs.
mhm.
It and those costs are extremely disproportionate to how many students they're actually helping. So this is a straight up old school economic conservative argument, way more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the way I understand the way the vouchers will work here, anyways. If you couldn't already afford private school, this isn't going to get you into private school because I think they're
It's
only
not enough
covering,
to cover tuition.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not enough to cover it. So it's really just giving a break to the people who can already afford private school and saying, here, have a refund, or a partial refund. But if it's
Now, yeah, no, and the, therefore the relevant argument is, look, this is going to end up costing the state more money than it should for these students who are already
yeah,
going to private school and whose parents can
yeah,
already afford private school.
yeah.
And
I mean,
if Arizona is a test case of how it seems like Abbott wants Texas's system to be set up, then we actually have data now that said that it cost almost $1 billion to fund schools because of this voucher program, and something like 53% of the budget increase goes to 8% of the students.
yeah. But Abbott isn't one that seems to really care about data. He cares about, what he can rile his base up about and all of that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So he doesn't really care what the data says, or how it's really working or not working somewhere else. It's just, this is another thing I can pitch and hopefully get me reelected.
Yeah. Dude, what is the sentiment there? Like, as a parent who's taking your kid to school and interacting with the other parents in your district and whatever, how is that? Uh, what is the sentiment that you're feeling there?
Um, I haven't really heard all that much. I mean, there's not a whole lot of talk about it, but maybe it's just I'm not in the circles that are excited about it. But the people I talk with, it's just it really hasn't come up all that much. So it's not something that I've really followed all that closely other than this is a stupid idea. It's not going to, do what you want. Um, it's probably going to be used more to push religion and religious schools. I know there was some arguments about that where, excuse me, some of the lawmakers were really trying to hone in on that part of the argument. And they basically just said, well, yeah, it could be used like that. And that was that. But Texas, they use religion to argue laws here all the time. Um, you know, the corporal punishment law that they've tried to remove 8 or 9 times by now. Um, every time they've argued it, to keep it, they use religion to argue it. Spare the rod, spoil the child. It's in the Bible, and they keep corporal punishment, which was something that just a couple weeks ago we went up to Dumas for part of the Protect Children project to, demonstrate at the school there. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
this is probably one of those things that uh only one of those conversations that only two people in our situations can kind of have, where we're both, spend a lot of time doing very public media as Satanists, and also having to navigate just the regular day to day of life of being parents and all that.
yeah,
And so with the school issues with the Protect Children project, it always seems to me that uh, the, there's a certain like elevation there of that's way beyond what goes on just interacting with parents in the neighborhood and play dates and all of that, right?
mhm. Um, so what do you mean by a certain elevation above that?
Well, I feel like any conversations that I'm having around my kid about my desire to see a federal ban on corporal punishment
oh yeah,
doesn't really enter into the average day to day, oh, you need to get up and go to school conversation, you know?
yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, because I think it depends on where you live. In the larger cities here in Texas, they don't typically do corporal punishment anymore. The Dallas, all of those, but
Mhm.
in the smaller cities out in the country, it's just a regular. It just seems like that's the way it is. I mean, I was in shock when read how many incidences of corporal punishment there were in last year. That was one of the things that
Yeah, that
got me to go up there. I was like, that's crazy.
yeah, it's always, and I think the worst thing about it is that statistic always correlates really well, like the instances of corporal punishment and the percentage of the kids who receive corporal punishment that are in some way neurodivergent, or like it's always awful how it just seems to affect the kids who need just need more help.
Yeah. Need more help. Different cultural backgrounds, economically different. It just, seems to go right along that line.
Hmm.
And if they're not doing that, then they're trying to restrict bathroom access or some stupid thing like that. I don't know. We always gave our kids permission to if the teachers tried to hold them up and not let them go to the bathroom. I've always told my kids just walk out of class. If you have to go to the bathroom, walk out of class. If the teacher says no, if the school calls me, I'll take care of that. And so our kids have always kind of felt safe and secure that they know that their parents have their back when it comes to these sort of things or the abuses that schools sometimes try and do to children. Um, whether it's bathroom, illegally searching their phone or something like that. They know they can say no and they're not going to get in trouble at home.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really important. Knowing your parents have your back, right? Like,
Yeah. It was kind of funny. I got a good story about it. So my well, she's 18 now. But when she was in middle school, my third oldest daughter, the principal called me and she was like, I have your daughter here in my office, and she was on her phone, and so we went to take her phone, and then when I asked her to open up her phone and allow me access to it, she asked me, "Do you have a warrant?" And so I said, "Well, do you have a warrant?" There was this really long pause. I don't think the principal wasn't expecting that. And I was like, look, you can tell her to put her phone up. You can give her a detention if she was using it, but you have no right to search her phone unless you have a warrant. So, do
yeah, I
what you're gonna
suppose that's
do. And
That's
you know,
definitely something that I mean, I think for the most part, most of us as parents tend to follow our parents' example, particularly if it's positive, right? And uh, we didn't really quite have to, our parents didn't really quite have to deal with us having digital access in nearly the same way that
oh,
our kids do.
no,
So
no.
yeah, that's a I don't
And
know if well I don't know what the right answer there is other than like like I don't right now I'm at the stage where my kid has a phone but it's Wi-Fi only, so when she's at school it doesn't work, you know
gotcha.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that
Well,
hasn't come up yet.
yeah, yeah. Mark the yet there. As they get older, it will. Um, I mean, you mentioned using our parents. I use I use my parents as a lot of what I not to do, but
Mhm.
because my parents generally did not have my back when it came to the school and stuff like that. It was like, oh, the school said you did this, or the school said this, or the school said that, and it didn't matter what I said. So um, I, I think it could go both ways. If you were lucky and you had good parents that had your back, that's a great example, and you can always kind of use that as your sort of starting line. But I think you could go the opposite way too, where if you did have parents that were either horrible or they just didn't have your back or something like that, you can use that as a parent. I look at it as a learning example of, I know what not to do with my kids because I know how it feels. I
Yeah, and you
know
can kind of
how
get that. You can kind of get. I mean, don't get me wrong. My folks are pretty good, but it's kind of that. Well, what would I have liked my parents to do if I was in that situation? Kind of empathy thing that
yeah,
you
yeah.
just have to learn to have with your kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and our house has always been a safe house. Our oldest daughter came out to us when she was in ninth grade. They had the oh, what's it called? They had the Gay Straight Alliance at their school, um, GSA program, which has to be sponsored by a teacher. And then, our house was the safe place for all of their friends to come to because a lot of their friends couldn't be themselves at their houses, or their parents would get mad at them or things like that. And so our house was always just kind of the safe place in the neighborhood to go and just be yourself. You are who you are. And even at that point, it was like, how would you like to be addressed? And let me know. And that's how I'm going to address you. And it was just, some of these kids, they're like, they've never seen this from a parent before. And they're just kind of shocked. Um, so in a good way.
And so I have to ask, by virtue of us both being Satanists, how the other parents reacted to your house becoming that house where the kids wanted to hang
Um, well, I mean, we had mixed results. We've had some parents that I mean, we don't really broadcast to the other parents that we're Satanists. So most of them don't know that part. They don't need to know that part. It's not
out. Yeah.
something they need to know.
It's not hidden,
But
but it doesn't come up.
it's right, right.
Yeah.
We have had my youngest daughter, uh Lillian has the TST sticker on the back of her car. And one of the times, what my daughter's friend came up and her mom came with her, and she just honed in and actually saw that, little sticker. It was like, wow, you paid attention to this little sticker. And at first, she was really freaked out. She told her daughter things like, if they start talking in Latin backwards and stuff like that and lighting candles, you need to leave the house and run and call me. And her daughter was like, Mom, they're not like that. They're not
We
like
had
that at all.
Cheetos and watched Bluey. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we decided to be proactive and said, hey, why don't you come over, hang out for dinner? some drinks, something
Yeah,
like
Nick the
that.
whole lady, I
Just
think. Yeah.
yeah, and she did, and you could tell she gave herself an out when she came in because she was like, "Oh, I might get a call in an hour, and if that comes up, then I might have to leave." You kind of see through it. She wound up staying for like 4 hours, and then after that, no, no, she's like, "Cool," she even sent her daughter over here one week, and she was like, "I need to do things. Can she stay there the weekend?" Sure, no problem. So parents that are actually open-minded to it and get to know us are generally like, hey, these are pretty, really normal, down-to-earth people who are nice. The ones that don't, then they can be a little bit freaked out or whatnot if they see that, or if they see, because our house is probably the only house in the neighborhood with a trans alliance flag out front. It's like, and I had somebody say, because on our first podcast, we said we just put the flag up. It's literally the only one in the neighborhood. And then we had somebody from the congregation come over, and they were like, you weren't kidding when it's the only one in the neighborhood. I drove through the neighborhood, and it really is the only one. I was like, oh, I wasn't bullshitting. See a lot of Trump stuff and all of that. But yeah, no other LGBTQIA flags. So
Well, I mean, it's heartwarming to hear that there are plenty of parents that are open minded about that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah, there are. And where we live in Texas is a lot different than if we lived out in the country in Texas. If we lived further away from the city, it would be a whole lot different than where we're
Yeah.
currently at. So I'm sure Arizona is probably that way too, where if you're by a metropolitan area, it's
Yeah, it changes the dynamic a lot.
changes the
Well,
dynamic.
especially I the weird thing is that Satanic Temple in Arizona has was such a media presence for so long that everybody kind of got acclimated to it. You know, and
Mhm.
I think you'll probably end up seeing the same thing with like the thing in Dumas and the Protect Children Project stuff. Is it other groups who aren't satanic but are perfectly in line with a lot of the stuff that these will more than happily become acclimated to
Yeah.
Satanists being around very quickly.
Yeah, we started going to a pagan market as a congregation. We started going to a pagan market up in Livingston, and we were invited by the guy who runs the market. And at first, some of the other vendors are like, "Oh, we don't want Satanists here," and then after our first time there, they were like, "These guys are really." These are really cool. We need to invite them back, and all that. So now we've had a perfectly fine relationship with that entire community. So
Yeah, and that kind of thing is great to see.
yeah, yeah, it is. We don't make the news much here in Houston, so it's probably different than, like you said, y'all were on the media a lot in Arizona. Texas congregations aren't in the media all that much. We get the occasional story or report
Right.
written up, but
But
not
it always seems to get
repetitive.
like it always seems to get the same amount of you know uh well, I guess it's uh what do they call it? Well, basically free advertising.
Yeah.
Like it always hits the same organizations kind of the same way. It just kind of depends like which you know preacher is going to make some YouTube video trashing it, right?
Yeah, in Livingston, we get the preachers that come out there, and they get on a bullhorn, and they literally just go and go. I mean, they will rant for 7, 8 hours just nonstop outside of the gate. They can't come in legally because the guys rented the facility and the property, so
Mhm.
they try and sneak in sometimes, but they just sit out there and just babble and babble and babble. um, or when we did our Black Mass here a few years, but pre-COVID, um, definitely had the religious crazies out there, and they had to have the police stand in the median so that they stayed on their
That's
side of the
actually something
street.
that, in my experience, that's something that actually seems to be worse when you're in a bigger city because they're still located there. Like
Yeah.
when the Arizona chapter would do stuff out in Bisbee, maybe like three old ladies from America Needs Fatima would be posted up across the street, and that would be it because nobody else was driving 3 hours to get to our stupid thing, right? So.
Right.
So when you do it right
Yeah.
in the heart of downtown, that's when you get the really vocal people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We get vocal people. We've had bomb threats, all that sort of stuff. Um, and you have to take it all seriously. I mean, because the minute you don't, if something was to happen, then it would fall on us and I'd feel like crap. I mean, so you have to take them all seriously, um, and then just kind of do your best. So, we somewhat stay off the radar, but not totally off the radar, I guess is how I would
Well,
say
it seems like
we are right now.
Protect Protect Children Project has a fairly long history with Texas, right? Like I think they've done billboard campaigns there for years now and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
But this was the first in-person event that they did. So, I mean, it was a good learning experience for the campaign as well. Like we learned, yes, you definitely need private security guards if you're going to do this anywhere else. Luckily, we had some, because we had one point where it could have gone really bad. It wasn't actually even at the school either. It was in between when we went to a cafe. So yeah, there were some learning experiences there. And I think if they continue to do the in-person ones, which I think they should, I think they'll just get better and stronger. So
Yeah, and well, okay, so we're getting there on time. So I guess well, okay, so let's talk about the podcast. You've been doing that
well, we can
for
keep talking dad
how
stuff.
we can keep talking dad stuff, but we're getting close. So you're going to need to plug the
Okay.
podcast soon anyway. So we may as well talk about that. Now, you've done some really good ones. You did one on the 2025 project, which was a pretty good deep dive on that horrible monstrosity that is the bastard child of Project Blitz.
Yes. Yeah. So Satanists Nextdoor, we started it a couple months ago. And we our goal was to release one a week. And generally we try and release them on Sunday nights. We've only missed one week, and that was because we were actually traveling for the project, the Protect Children project. So that one really couldn't be helped. But yeah, we did Project 2025. We're trying to hit all the all the things that affect you as a Satanist, especially if you have a family or something like that. So we were trying to be a little different than just a lot of podcasts, a lot of satanic or left-hand podcasts that are just, kind of recycle the same stuff. We hate Christians, blah 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 blah, Um and so we try and talk about things that affect real life, abortion, LGBTQIA rights, Project 2025, like you mentioned, the bastard stepchild of Project Blitz, which we've talked about Project Blitz on there before too, just to also help if people run across it and they're like, who are these Satanists? And we picked Satanists Nextdoor because we wanted to put that image out there that hey, we are, we could be your next door neighbors. You wouldn't really know it unless we told you. And here's the stuff that affects us, and it's very possible it'll resonate with you too, even if you're not a Satanist.
Right, because whether or not, regardless of your religious persuasion, having kids in a kind of middle class lifestyle is pretty much the same, regardless of what your faith tradition and
Yeah. as long as your ideologies, along the same. If you're a hardcore conservative, obviously it wouldn't be a podcast for them. But
Yeah,
anybody,
but at the same time, even if you are a hardcore conservative and if you've got a family and kids, you know what? Your kids are probably just as much of a pain in the ass as everybody else's kids, and and there's
yeah,
going to be stuff in common because they're all going to school together. Like
yeah, definitely. And that's the subject matters that we try and touch on. And, we've got a whole list, just sort of a backlog of things that we want to talk about and things like that. And I have to plug Lillian because she does, half of it. And she does a really good job helping me come up with topics and doing a lot of deep dive and research and stuff too. So, she's really good at deep diving into the political stuff and, what bills are coming up, why, what happened with this. So give my give my lovely wife some credit there as well.
yeah, yeah, no, it is a very informative show. You do a good job with that.
Cool. All right.
Well, on that note, I think we're pretty much as long as I go. I try to do a half-hour show with
Okay.
my intro and stuff. I can always bat it a minute or two, but it feels like I don't remember exactly what time you signed on, but
Yeah, it's been about a half hour. So,
yeah, give or take.
yeah. So again, sorry for the voice. Fighting a
No, no,
cold. So
perfectly okay. Hey, you were on a work call before this. You said, and
yeah,
I remember when I was working my day job and trying to fit in the podcasting in between everything and making those schedules happen. So I understand and I appreciate it, even though that you soldiered through and came on while you're a little under the weather. Thank you so much for doing that.
yeah. Thanks for having me on, Jack. And we could do it again. Maybe I won't be so loopy on cough medicine and all of that from being sick, and maybe we can have an even better conversation at that point.
Yeah, it's a weird time of year, but I was glad we were able to fit in, and we can definitely have you or both of you back on to do this again sometime for sure.
Awesome. Cool.
All
Well,
right. Well, thank you so
thank you very
much.
much. Cal Satan.